Welcome everyone. The vast majority of the questions I get on stream and in the comments section of my videos are questions about my UI, what I'm running, and where you can find my profiles, add-ons, and weak auras. So in this video, I'm going to go over my setup and show you some of the basics of how to modify your UI. Before I go any further, if you have zero interest in watching this video and simply want to know where you can find all the relevant links, then hop over to my Discord server, link in the description below, and go to the WoW profile info channel where I have links to my ElvUI profile, Plater profile, weak auras, and a list of my add-ons. I do my best to keep everything up to date, but ping me in Discord if you notice I'm missing something, and I'll try to get it updated as soon as I can for you. I've been testing some of my weak auras this week on beta and have a few modifications I want to make, so stay tuned for those changes right after Shadowlands launches. The first thing I want to say about UIs before we jump into my specific UI is the most important thing is your UI needs to work for you. I used to import a bunch of weak auras from other people and didn't really find they worked well for me, which is why I made a bunch of custom stuff for myself. I mention this because I don't want you to think that this video is about what you should do with your UI. It's simply me showing you what I choose to do so you can incorporate some of these elements into your UI if you like them. There are several world first raiders that use the default Blizzard UI with minimal add-ons. So if you're more of a minimalist, then you can pretty much get away with just running two add-ons, weak auras and boss mods. The most popular ones being bigwigs and deadly boss mods. When it comes to your UI, I recommend keeping these three main principles in mind. First, every element you add to your UI should enable you to make faster and more accurate decisions. Also, you should look to remove elements from your UI if they don't help your decision making, since those elements just clutter up your screen and serve as distractions. You also don't want your UI to cause alert fatigue, which is basically the idea that if you're constantly seeing flashes and glows and hearing audio cues, you start to get numb to them and don't respond as quickly to the important ones. A general rule I have is I only set a glow for something I want to keep on cooldown, or I'll temporarily add a glow to something if I've noticed from logs that I'm bad at keeping it on cooldown. A good example of this is Prayer of Mending for a Holy Priest. There's really never any reason in Raid to not cast this on cooldown, so I make sure it glows when it comes off cooldown so I know to press it right away. Second, your UI needs to make it easy to quickly respond to what's happening around you. If you're a healer, healing frame add-ons like Voodoo or Click or mouse over macros can speed up your healing and make it easier to switch between healing and DPSing. Keybinds are also incredibly important. I'll link my keybinds for all my specs in the description below, and again, I wouldn't recommend copying this, but more use it as a guideline. I recently reworked all my keybinds to make them more consistent across all specs. For example, Mindseer got added to Discipline, and Desperate Prayer got added to Shadow. I reworked my keybinds so these spells map to the same key across these different specs. I also try to identify which keybinds are easy to use and which ones are a bit clunky. For example, I put my frequently cast spells close to my WASD movement keys and my less frequently cast spells farther away. For example, Shadow Repain is my E key, but Shadow Fiend is Shift 5. I'm also experimenting with the Opie add-on to free up some keybinds. I put some of my utility spells like Power Word Fortitude and Intellect Potion on the same Opie ring, and have another Opie ring for crowd control spells and my Set Focus and Clear Focus macros. Again, I'm not saying you should do this the exact same way as me, but having a plan for your hotkeys can help you make sure you have everything right there at your fingertips. And this gets me to my final UI design principle. Always be experimenting with and improving your UI. I can practically guarantee that a few weeks after Shadowlands goes live, my UI will be different than what you're seeing in this video. I'm always trying out new things, seeing how they feel, and iterating on them. I highly recommend you do the same. If you like my UI and choose to import it, make changes to it and see how they work for you. If you find a better way to do something, please let me know in the comments below or in my Discord because I'm always looking to make improvements. The vast majority of my UI elements are either based on someone else's setup that I liked or at least inspired by something I saw. If you're always analyzing your setup and improving it, you'll be in great shape. Now let's jump into how I set up my UI. First of all, the base add-on I use is ElvUI. ElvUI is a replacement to the Blizzard UI that gives you a lot of extra flexibility and customization options. However, whenever you're dealing with these kinds of UI replacements, you should keep a few things in mind. First, whenever you're adding flexibility, you're also adding complexity, which may or may not be worth it to you. ElvUI also introduces computational and memory overhead, which can slow your game down, especially if you don't have the most powerful PC. I remember having performance issues in a 40v40 battleground, and disabling ElvUI significantly increased my performance. It's possible I also had some other things going on at the time and ElvUI wasn't the only culprit, but I want to be sure I mention all the bad with the good. ElvUI might not be the best for you, but it may be worth trying out. I change my ElvUI profile constantly, but if you're looking to import my profile as a starting point, I have a pastebin link in my Discord that I keep up to date with any changes I make. All you have to do is copy the import string from pastebin, open up ElvUI by either typing /ElvUI or hitting escape and clicking on ElvUI, going to profiles, then click on import profile, paste the import string using Ctrl+V, and click on import now. One thing you'll notice with my ElvUI profile is if you go to nameplates, I have them disabled. This is because I use another add-on for nameplates. So if you don't use another nameplate add-on, you're going to have to enable nameplates in ElvUI and configure them to your liking, or get a nameplate add-on. I'll go over Plater in a bit, and I have a profile for that as well. One of the coolest things about ElvUI is if you click on toggle anchors, you can move just about anything around. Keep in mind that a lot of the box sizes are set from other locations. For example, the party frame size can't be set in this screen. The party frame box is simply 5 times the size of each individual party frame you set. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to resize those frames. You could get out of the anchor screen by clicking lock, then browse to unit frames, group units, and click on display frames. Now you can adjust the properties including height and width, and if you wanted to change the location of your newly sized party frames, you could go back to toggle anchors and change the location. Clicking on display frames a second time will turn the sample frames back off. There are literally hours upon hours of ElvUI tutorials out there. You can see how many options and how much functionality is baked into this base UI. You can also enable or disable individual elements like nameplates or bags if you have other add-ons you'd prefer using. Speaking of other add-ons to use instead of the default ElvUI functionality, let's talk about Plater. I like Plater again because of its flexibility. I saw a profile I really liked on stream, specifically a streamer named Nihilo who plays a lot of Guardian Druid, and I copied his profile and made a bunch of modifications to make it exactly the way I wanted it to look for my priest. Just like ElvUI, to import a Plater profile, type /Plater, go to Profiles, Import Profile, paste the import string, then click OK. One of the big modifications I made was to correct for a bug that's currently in WoW, or at least was the last time I checked. The max distance for plates to display doesn't seem to work correctly. But I used a workaround where I set plates to 0 overall alpha, so I made them all invisible, and then set in-range alpha to 1.0. Since all the range checks for all my specs are set to 40 yards, nameplates won't show up unless a mob is close enough for me to cast spells on them. Plater gives you a million ways to customize your frames, and this is just one example of how useful it can be. I also really liked the green arrow on my current target as a way to filter through the noise during combat, and you can also customize how your focus target looks. The possibilities are almost endless. If you mess something up accidentally, you can always re-import the profile. Before I get into weak auras, I want to briefly discuss macros. I personally choose not to use a healing add-on and instead use mouse over macros. I've heard some great things about Voodoo and a few other add-ons, and I've tried them out, but I just personally prefer to use regular mouse over macros with the ElvUI unit frames. All of my mouse over macros look something like this. I added in a part with the alt modifier to make it easier to cast on myself. You can also expand on this simple macro in a few ways. You can see here that my Prayer of Mending macro will attempt to do 4 separate things. First, if I'm holding Alt, it will cast Prayer of Mending on me. Next, it will cast Prayer of Mending on my mouse over target if it's friendly and not dead. If neither of these conditions are met, it will smite my target if the target is hostile. And finally, it will attempt to Prayer of Mending my target. This may seem super complicated at first, and maybe you have no interest in something like this, but it lets you use the same hotkey for multiple spells without using any modifiers. Clearly, this wouldn't work with 2 healing spells, and it has the negative side effect of not smiting your target if you accidentally mouse over someone, so use something like this with caution. But I like to use it, so I thought I'd mention it here. A few other great quality of life macro features are using @player or @cursor. For example, an @player angelic feather macro will make it auto cast on you without having to click the ground. And @cursor with something like Shadow Crash will make it automatically cast at your cursor's location without having to deal with the targeting circle. Also, after dying several times to casting Levitate and having it levitate someone else who was targeted, I changed my Levitate to be an @player macro as well. Now it just kills other people when I try to cast it on them and forget that it auto-casts on myself, but I'm okay with that. Additionally, it will cancel Levitate if cast a second time with the cancel aura command. Very useful. Okay, enough about macros. Let's talk about the meat and potatoes of your UI, weak auras. Weak auras are hands down the most important piece of your UI. Weak auras are incredibly strong and can straight up do calculations for you that you'd be unable to do during an encounter and tell you exactly what you need to know. Remember, the primary goal of your UI is to give you the information you need to make decisions. Anytime you can offload calculations to your UI or have it remind you to do something at a certain time, you're freeing up more brain cells to make decisions. We can only process so much information at a time, so you want to make sure you're only thinking about making decisions and you're offloading the menial bean counting to your UI. The most commonly used weak auras are the spell pack weak auras. Basically, a set of spell icons placed near the middle of your screen so you don't have to keep looking at your spell bars and losing situational awareness of your character. It's a good idea to put the most important information near your character model so you can get those notifications without risking not seeing the fire on the ground. Also, clearing out less important notifications from the center of your screen will prevent you from losing focus on what's important. I would highly recommend you tailor your spell pack weak aura since you'll be looking at this thing a lot. The ones you can download will probably either have a few spells you don't care about, or they'll be missing a few spells you do care about. So how do you modify a weak aura pack? You can write an entire dissertation on weak auras, so I'll keep this brief, but I'll walk you through a recent change I made to mine. So I wanted to start using Shadow Crash in Mythic Plus Dungeons on beta, but I found that I kept forgetting to use it. I don't think I've used Shadow Crash since BFA 8.1, so it's just not something I think to press. I decided that to train myself to remember to use it, I wanted to add a glow effect when it comes off cooldown. My Shadow spell pack is a modified version of Publix, who by the way is an amazing Shadow Priest. I highly recommend you check out his channel if you haven't already. To add the glow, I went to the Shadow Crash icon, went to Conditions, Add Condition, if on cooldown equals false, then glow, and check the box. When I exit out, you can see the Shadow Crash now has a glow when it's off cooldown, and still has the other condition where it's desaturated when on cooldown. You can also change the locations of icons to fit your style. Now, weak auras can get very complex. One example was the weak aura for the Vectis fight from Uldir in BFA. In that fight, each player could get a stacking debuff by either getting hit by a mechanic or by having a debuff jump from the closest player. So there was a weak aura that counted the stacks of debuffs on each player in a group, then notified the player with the fewest number of stacks to move to a specific position to receive the jumping debuff. This weak aura greatly trivialized that mechanic of the encounter. I know a lot of people have their thoughts on whether or not this is healthy for the game, but I use this as an example to show how powerful scripting can be in weak auras. Now, I could literally talk for days about these add-ons, but my goal in this video was to give you an overview of each UI element, give you instructions on how to get my profiles and add-ons, and go a little deeper into each part with a specific example. I have no doubt that this video probably will introduce more questions than answers, but I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope it's useful to you. I'll be changing my UI pretty frequently in Shadowlands, so don't forget to subscribe and join my Discord to get all the latest updates. As always, thanks for watching, good luck in Shadowlands, and I'll see you next time.